Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss at Internet Shitlords. Today I'm going to be reviewing Ankur Kingdom of the Gods, which is a kind of weird science fantasy Sumerian adventuring in the style of the writings of Eric von Daniken. But before that, I wanted to comment. First of all, if you've been watching my stuff for a while, please subscribe. If you like this video at the end, please share it everywhere. And be sure to check out my various products like The Invisible College, which is doing very well. OSR, Occult Modern Conspiracy Role-Playing, 432 pages. Or like all my other stuff, my RPG Pundit Presents PDF series. It's Big Chungus. Big Chungus has decided to join the review. All right, so share my stuff. Check out Lion and Dragon is now a platinum bestseller, so check out Lion and Dragon. And, also I'm still keeping open for a new publisher for my upcoming book on the Silk Road and the Third Crusade. And so if you're a publisher and you're interested in pitching it to me, then, pitching me what your offer would be of how you would handle my book if you published it, then please get in touch, as long as you've done at least one RPG product. In this case, we've got here the Ankur Player Guide and the Ankur Game Master Guide. The Ankur Player Guide is about 300 pages, 310 pages. The Game Master Guide is considerably thinner, 125 or so. And one thing I'm going to say first off is this book is quite nicely designed, good layout, good framing, good art. It's been well put together, visually very appealing. And so, I even commented to the guy when I'm talking about publishers. This book it's been published by, what is it? It's Mad Scribe Games. It was written and designed by Chris Miller. And I told the publisher that if they're interested, because what I saw I quite liked of how they, it's very, very good production value, so they can give me a pitch, right? So if you've got a book, you don't have to be a big publisher. You don't have to be a well-known publisher. You need to have done something I can look at and see if I like how well you did it, right? And know what you're about. Now, what is Ankur Kingdom of the Gods about? Well, it's an RPG. So let's go right to the back here first of all. It's an SF fantasy tabletop game based on ancient Sumerian mythology. The game takes place on Earth just after the Great Flood, 25,000 years in the past. A species of alien beings from the planet Nibiru, that is from Nibiru, which is from Eric von Daniken. I don't know, some of you might not be aware that there's this whole subsect of conspiracy theory and weird alien literature that has to do with this idea of Nibiru or Planet X, and that there are these alien beings that are on this planet that comes by every 25,000 years, and that when they come by, they will cause terrible devastation, and the government knows about this and is keeping it secret, and the aliens have agents here and all this sort of stuff, right? It's really funny. But anyways, this is clearly inspired by that. It's the sort of thing you could use in Invisible College, not what's in here, but those sort of ideas, But here in Ankur, the idea is basically Earth when it was let's say the colonized planet of the Nibiruans, and so that's quite an interesting premise. It's using the backstory of the Eric von Daniken loony bin theories as a fantasy tale. And there's an introduction here, a preface, that is kind of lengthy and doesn't get into much of importance except his own personal journey, so that's fine. Okay, introduction of the book itself. Here we go. So it says, you're going to see some stuff here that it says that Ankur's an indie role-playing game incorporating a large set of original game mechanics. Inside, you'll find 5 unique player character species, 7 character casts, a detailed world overview, chapters on weapons, equipment, clothing, crafting, and healing. All player character species and casts were carefully thought up to exemplify historical and mythological archetypes while still supporting game balance. Big Chungus has retreated back to her little cave. Okay. It says, although Ankur has a cast system, it allows a great deal of freedom and skill selection. Like, this reads like an ad, and it reads like a not entirely coherent ad, let's say, because and this is like one of the flaws of the book, which is that the way it's got stuff ordered doesn't seem quite right for me, right? Like, there's stuff that should be explained earlier that is left for later, and there's stuff that is disconnected from other stuff. You get the what is an RPG, how to play this game. And I guess the first and biggest problem of this book is that it's not an OSR game. So if you only like OSR gaming, I guess that's it for you. Well, we'll see you next time. Take care, right? Instead, this is a system that has, as its core mechanic, a D12 roll, just because I guess someone wanted to show some love for the D12, where you have to roll under. So the higher you roll, the worse it is. And that's sort of another thing I dislike, which is roll under mechanics, because it just doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel natural in a D20. If you roll a 20 and you're like, oh crap, I rolled a 20, that's awful. And then you roll a 1, you're like, 1, hooray! You know, it just doesn't suit. You know, it doesn't fit our human nature to do that. You know? So I don't like roll under mechanics. And the basic system is very, very simple, right? Like, you have a value in whatever your skill is. You roll a d12, and if you get that or less, you succeed. If you get higher, you fail. If you get the exact number, it's a critical. And if you get a 12, or sometimes even lower than a 12, depending on how badly the disadvantages for you are, you can get a fumble. Okay, the basic mechanic, super simple. And in some other places, it's not on here, but it was in the back or in the introduction, but I think in the drive-through page for this book, it's advertised as a rules light game. This is not a rules light game. The core mechanic is a simple mechanic, but that doesn't make it a rules light game, right? And this is when we get into some issues here, because the next thing we talk about is like, okay, oppose checks and saves, and then suddenly we're talking about toughness, which is like the resistance value that a person has, or the damage value that it has. Stamina, which is, you know, how much action you can take. Armor, like, but it's all disconnected, right? Like, it doesn't start. See, newbie game designers, right? Here's a tip, right? This is the format you use for making a coherent game that'll be easy for someone to pick up. First, short introduction, very broad overview, nothing else than that. Don't go into huge detail at the top, just short introduction, right? Then, how to create a character. Step 1, attributes, assuming your game has them. Step 2, derived attributes. You do that after the attributes, right? Step 3, background, skills, any of that other stuff that you add on from there, right? And then any special powers or abilities, classes, levels, etc. And at each stage, you explain that. You shouldn't have anything that you have to that you have to define before it is defined, right? Like, if you're suddenly talking about aptitudes, and aptitude saves. An aptitude here is just basically an ability, right, or a skill. but that isn't what, like an aptitude check is a check in your skills or your abilities, right? But you still don't have your skills and abilities, and suddenly you're talking about wounds and minimum debt. All of this should have been after after the basic starting part. And I don't know why it was there. But anyways, this is just, that's a bit nitpicky, I guess, but what, it matters. And then, again, this is not rules light, right? Here we get into a much bigger problem with this game, which is that it is a point-by game. You start with 20 aptitude points. Where is that? 20 aptitude points that you have to spread around among your ability scores. Ability scores range from 1 to 5, where 1 is below average and 5 is divine. So it's a pretty low range. I guess it's because you're working with the D12 and because you're going to have skills and all that. But it still seems to me like that does not give you a wide power level range. And I have trouble thinking of someone having a 5 in a thing as being, divine means godlike. So, I don't think that makes sense, right? And then on top of that, besides those 20 points, you're going to have to also allot, and here's where it gets much worse, 150 experience points for starting skills. Because, of course, skills are all point by also. And then, all your ability scores have different things that they modify. A lot of these are well explained. I'm not going to, it's not that it's badly written up. It's sometimes been badly ordered. And so it's fine, but this is not a simple system, right? It's a system where you have a lot of different modifiers for things, where you have a lot of different ways to buy things. There's like simple skills and complex skills and trial and error checks. So like it's for how you get your skills. Then there are modifiers of minimums and maximums for different types of races, which is a little bit bigoted, but we're okay with that part. Cast aptitude, I mean, they're not real races, right, except the humans, and they're just one thing. Cast aptitude modifiers, so apparently different castes have different modifiers to aptitudes. That's okay too, basically, because it's a reflection. Being from a different caste means you have a different upbringing, so you will probably have different things you have to focus on, right? An intellectual caste of people are going to probably not be extra strong and agile, whereas if you're from the warrior caste, you will be. Okay. Then there's ages. Like there's a lot of details here of different things, right? There's some random personality traits which you can roll for on 2d12 because it's all d12 based. And there's advantages and disadvantages also, which at first I saw had a roll thing. I thought, oh, well, at least they're randomly rolled, but they're not. It just says roll 1d12 there, but it's like it says that you have to get you can. It doesn't say that you have to roll a d12. So I'm assuming that it's optional to roll a d12, but in fact, people can just buy advantages and disadvantages. So again, that's one of the big problems of point buy, where you start using advantages and disadvantages, min-maxing the system. Character creation here, you've got 150 XP, 20 base points, advantages and disadvantages, different ranks of skills that you have to spend, different amounts you have to spend on different types of skills. If you're playing with newbies, character creation is going to take 4 hours, right? Or maybe 3. If the DM is really good at explaining it, maybe 2. Now, the guy creating the game, he could probably get you through it in 45 minutes per character, but that's a problem because he thinks it's easy, right? Character morality, neutral, righteous, wicked. You get karma points. Playable species. Now, the part that's really cool about the game is when we get to the crazy sci-fi, because I think you were wondering at this point, is there anything good about this game? I mean, I already mentioned the production values, but then we have very interesting stuff about, there's different races that are on Earth 25,000 years ago, which can include other types of humans, literally other types of humans, right? Because these are races that were that are other human species that later become extinct or what have you, and then also creatures that are genetically modified by the Nibiruans to have certain preferred traits. We have a caste system, a social system. Now, I'm going to preface before I get any further here to say this is clearly a fantasy setting, right? It's not meant to be a literal historical RPG. It's not even based on actual like role-playing in the world of Sumerian myth. This is role-playing in a science fantasy sci-fi setting with aliens and weird technology but genetic engineering in ancient Sumeria. And you can tell that the author has done a bit of study, much more than, a normal, I don't think it's just like he read a Wikipedia page. There's some research that went into the details of the Sumerian culture, but there's also a lot of stuff where it isn't authentic, right? Obviously the wacky alien stuff for starters, but there's other stuff too. And I think he's made some choices about certain decisions that are useful for the mechanics of the game or for the system or for the playability that are not in any way really authentic. Now, I'm not an expert on Sumerian culture, but I'm pretty sure that the castes here are not correctly... They're not castes, for starters. This is not a caste system, what he's about to describe here. And so it's very funny in a way. But again, this isn't that important, because as long as it just depends on whether you accept the game or not, right? So you got here this argument that, like, okay, the aliens are basically in control of the society, and they've set up training programs with like computers that basically from when your character was 8 years old, they were taken from their family. A caste is selected for them based on a series of tests, and they spend their lives training to be part of that one caste. And then, like, in Arrows of Indra, you have castes, but they're the real castes, from Indian culture. Here you have like a healer, entertainer, soldier, a psionicist, and a scribe. So these aren't castes. These are jobs, right? These are builders, a builder, and a barbarian. I'm pretty sure, even though it doesn't expressly say, but it does say like these are people that live out in the wilderness. So I'm assuming that they haven't been trained by the computer, but you can't be totally sure here. But the other ones are all basically like, so if you're saying caste, this means that these are the only levels of society there are, right? So like these are all the people. Like, where are the workers, the farm workers, right? Like that's a caste, right? Like the castes in most ancient societies were basically the rural farm workers and lowly servants, right? The merchants and craftsmen, the fighter guys, and then the priest guys, and then some, like maybe some kind of outcasts or untouchables types, right? Like those would have been the standard castes, right? The workers, the trained workers, the scholars / priests, and the warriors / rulers, right? That's what you would have, right? This is not a caste system in any actual historical sense. But what it is it's basically a character class system, because it gives you, the skills that you're allowed to pick from and the special bonuses that you get. Next we get to skills. And again, remember, this is advertised at one point as a low, as a rules light system, right? And I just want to point out, skills are all very nice. They all work fine, what have you. But starts on page 65, ends on page 144, because the next one is 145. So that is basically 80 pages of the 305-page book is skills. Now, the skills, because of the game system, includes a lot of different and because of the setting, it includes a lot of different tech levels and things like that. Because you have like leatherworking, and then you have, I don't know, I don't think it's literally nuclear technician, but there's something around there. You have like psionic powers, all of that sort of stuff is in there, right? Spacesuit operation, right? So leatherworking and spacesuit operation are both skills in this game. So okay, I mean that's fair enough, but just to give you an idea, right? The Invisible College, 423 pages. That's bigger than Ankur. 5.5 pages it's the skill section out of that, right? So this is a game where the guy has a house system. He has his mechanics. He likes his mechanics. I do not much like his mechanics, but I think the mechanics are probably all right. If you like point buy, thank God it's not a dice pool. That's like the only thing that's saving this, right? But if you like point buy, if you don't mind a single D12 roll under mechanic as your system, right? It's probably okay, right? It is still, the fundamental mechanic is very easy. There's a lot of explanations of skills, a lot of possible tables and modifiers. But you could also, as a DM, if you really wanted to make it rules light, just ignore a bunch of that shit and just get into very bare bones play, right? You could do it. Game setting, right? So this is all about, you have the Nibiru who came and, have caused all kinds of a mess for, there's various races among the Nibiru who are obviously like meant to represent the different inspirations for our eventual mythology, over thousands of years. And they've been, screwing around with Earth. There was a flood, a cataclysmic flood, the Great Flood, about 30,000 years ago. And then the Lords of Nibiru returned and have made, because they'd been coming and going, right? But so they went and recreated new species and have built their colony again. There's a lot of different elements to the background. I don't want to go on forever here. Look at that. That's a nice little production value there of the system, the planet as it looks like in 25,000 now. Of course, this is, this is wrong, right? Like historically, but we don't care because according to Daniken, this all was right. That these things did not exist at the same time, but we're going to pretend they did. And that's perfectly fine because this isn't actual historical role playing, right? So that's cool. Don't have to worry about it. We get it, right? This is about the people who think that all the pyramids are built by aliens, anywhere, at any time. You build a pyramid today, alien did it, Then we're getting to specific areas. There's a lot of cultural detail here, of places, of customs, of feasts, the law, some proverbs, tech level, and then, there's the monetary systems, equipment. And again, like equipment, you can have a spear, a sling spear, and a computer. Although that does not look like the most advanced computer you could imagine. But those things, whatever the hell that is, that looks cool, right? So you've got all the weapons here. The game itself is pretty good. Again, you've got. There are some places, some things, like for example in the skills, the Sumerian, not even the Sumerian names, because some of these aren't really. He didn't use Sumerian for a lot of them. A lot of them are Proto-Indo-European. For example, Kalari is not. For example, instead of using wrestling as the skill name, he calls it Kalari, right? And Kalari is not even a Sumerian word. It's a Proto-Indo-European word that later emerges into Sanskrit and other places, right? But in most cases he ends up explaining it, so that's okay. And it's not like generally, even though here he has like names, the names for common weapons like sword and knife. It's not that syndrome that you see in some of these weirdo games where like you literally have to be constantly referring to some kind of glossary to even understand what the hell he's talking about. That's not going on here, right? There's rules for crafting. In fact, if you do like complex rules, like you've got stuff for, making shit and for vehicle movement and combat, right? One of the things that I've been criticized about in Invisible College, and I guess it is a very legitimate criticism, and it just didn't even cross my mind, is that I don't have, somebody said, well, you don't have a vehicle system in Invisible College. And I'm like, yeah, I do. It's a skill. It's called drive car, right? And that's it. You roll drive car when you're in your vehicle. And if you're going to shoot, well, you do some kind of modifier if you're shooting out of your vehicle. But I didn't actually get a whole system for like car chases or, aerial combat or something. It's not in there, right? I mean, I do have that for starship combat and Star Adventure, but I didn't think of doing it all there. But here, you've got all of it. Like it's a very complete book, and there's combat only shows up around page 249. Depending on, again, it's pretty standard. You can have multiple actions per round depending on your, whatever it is, your agility attribute. And, it's all very typical. It's based on opposed checks, and then damage is modified via toughness. And then personal defense rating is something that adds to block and attack potentially. But yeah, it's good. It's a very detailed combat system that, again, you could probably pare down and do all very simply as well if that's more your style. But it's here for you if you need it, right? And this is critical tables here, healing. So you've got all the stuff. And you've got a good amount of like culture material, right? And then I'm going to get to like there's stuff on religion and the spirit world here. And then you get to the Game Master's Guide, because what you're still left without in the Player's Guide is an idea of, well, but what do you actually do, right? Like, so the Game Master's Guide is pretty essential if you're going to do that right, and here I'm going to do this. There we go. You start with something that is very like extremely hopeful of the author. You know that in my books I never put a like what is role playing section, and that's because I'm always pretty much just guaranteed assuming that the people that are paying attention to my books are people that already know the game. There's no way that they're not going to know about this, right? But here he puts like a whole thing of like how to run your game. What about, should we bring food? How to prepare your session. I would never put any of this in my products because I'm just going to assume that almost everyone has got this because this, my game is not going to be their first game. But it's nice to see that going on, even though it takes up like 20 pages of the book. Then we get to some random tables, and this is where we have some nice stuff, which is, NPC generation, equipment generation, random items, random goods, hex crawl tables, so you can do, like, if you want to have an open kind of sandbox campaign, have just people wandering around, generic NPC templates, nature and survival, so some more rules here for, like, DM regulating stuff from all kinds of different conditions. And then a bestiary of the creatures that you might find. See, for example, one of the things here is this should be the alphabetical order should be in English. Nobody is going to remember it. I mean, I don't know how many DMs are going to be rushing to find a bull for a random encounter, but I mean, it could happen. I mean, bulls were actually in real life. Wild bulls were a very important random encounter in the ancient world, right? But, nobody's going to remember, oh, it's an ambara, So they really should have put it there. You can find a woolly mammoth, pterosaurs. So there's some stuff that's real, some stuff that is not real, like scorpion men, though scorpion men were kind of mythological in some cases. And regular animals, the original manticore, snake people, the hippo, the deadliest, nature's deadliest predator, and saber-toothed tiger. So you got a lot of stuff. Some of them have some more detail than others. And then you get to stories and adventures. The stories is a set of short in-game fiction. All of you who have watched my shows, my reviews, know what I think of in-game fiction. There is far too much in-game fiction in this. Again, what is that? 8 and so 14 pages of in-game fiction. Jesus. And then adventures. You've got a short adventure that has material that is gives you some ideas. So I guess I should say in the first one, the player characters are asked to try to investigate some strange deaths, and so they're members of their guild, right? And so apparently the guilds have to, like, this is a very good basic premise. The guild members have to provide service to their guilds for a certain period of the month to. They engage in their own trade, but you have to give service to the guild. The guild has to give service to the city to the king, etc., etc. And so the player characters could be called on as experts to deal with stuff like mysterious murders and, being able to resolve these cases, and that might be what brings them together. And of course, if they die, they die. But if they survive, then they might get a bit of a reputation for it and start being the ones that are always called when there's weird crap going down, right? There's also stuff like being called by your guild to do service for a higher ranking lord, right? And so you could end up having the characters all be working as representatives of their respective guilds for an aristocrat. And then you could also have stuff that has like personal elements or things to do with political conflicts and what have you. And war, right? There can be siege and warfare, like it says here. A nice map here of a Sumerian city and the plan of a ziggurat and of a local starting. This is we're told in the book this is a potential starting region, right? And you've got cities, towns, spaceports. That's a spaceport there. And defense arrays. So there's like it's a cool mix of sci-fi with like ancient fantasy with weird elements. Here's the character sheet. Resources and equipment, etc. And that is the Ankur Game Master's Guide and Player's Guide. My final judgment is the setting is very interesting. I don't care at all for the system in particular. It's not terrible. It's not a terrible system, but it has some features that I particularly don't like. If you really love point buy systems. This looks like a good point buy system. The mechanic is basic, functional. You'd have to actually play it for a good while to see if it holds up over long range. Like if as you get experience points and you get more skills, that range that it has of 1 to 5 out of 12 for attributes, and then the skills on top of that, it could be very easy that if you, depending on how much XP you're getting, because you already start with quite a bit, right? And then if you get more, there's a risk that you could have characters top out too soon, like become just way too good at everything too quickly. But I don't know. You'd have to test that. That's the thing that's hard sometimes to judge by reading. But the setting itself is wild and quite interesting. It's got that crazy mix of alien overlords and weird races and crazy things that are also there's space lasers and there's stuff that looks like magic, though it's really probably super technology. And it's got a good little gonzo vibe to it. I kind of wish it had been OSR. It would have been really great if it had been OSR. We could have had a wacky Sumerian planetary fantasy or OSR RPG. Maybe someday he'll make an OSR version. Who knows? On the whole, again, if the setting seems interesting to you and you don't, and the nature of it being not OSR and being a point buy system, if neither of those are killers for you, like are absolute no's, then it could be worth checking out. Okay, and I guess that's where I'm going to leave it. I will mention I have no, at least for the moment, no commercial connection to the publisher or the writer, anyone involved in this book. I make no money from this book. This is not a promotion. This is a review. The book was sent to me free of charge, but with the understanding that I was under no requirement to give a positive review, which, as you can see, I've given it a mixed review leaning towards maybe negative on some points. On some other points, I think there's some really good stuff in here. And I think probably my biggest compliment is that the layout and the production value is quite good, and would the company, the people that have made the book, would be quite welcome if they want to try and pitch me on producing my my upcoming Silk Road book. So there you are. You can find Ankur on Drive-Thru. I believe they had done a Kickstarter. That Kickstarter is over now, as far as I know. Maybe the creator will be able to correct me if you can still buy into the Kickstarter post completion or something. But if not, I believe that you can get it on Drive-Thru, and the link will be provided in the description below. And that's everything for today. Currently smoking Lorenzetti egg plus Argento Natural. Be sure to subscribe and share the video everywhere you think people will like it. See you later.